I'm Heather from booktubes, and today is my May reading wrap-up. In the month of May, I read 26 books. I DNF'd 4 of them, so a low DNF month for me. So I'm going to talk about 22 today. These are in chronological order, except for some of the manga. If I read another volume in the series, I just clumped them together rather than chronologically. Alright, so starting with Sinners Anonymous, which is Sinners Anonymous number 1 by Somme or Somme Sketcher. I gave this 3 stars. This is a dark mafia romance, and honestly, there were some things about it that I understood the hype and I understood the appeal, and there were some things about it that I really did not. This girl is engaged to this really old mafia guy in order to save her father's land, and she is in this mafia family by force basically. And then she's going to have a romance with her fiance's nephew. So he's still older than her. Her fiance's old and abusive and a horrible person, right? Also, I don't love the way they describe him as old and fat and how repulsive that is. I'm never really a fan of that. We have content warnings for rape, domestic abuse, dementia, disordered eating, smoking, suicide, sexual harassment, and a lot of reasons why I didn't think that the plot worked. A lot of reasons. And also her father has situational dementia, so he is in his right mind if he's in the right environment, or environmental dementia I think is what it's called. So in this specific spot, he's her dad, and outside of it, he is a dementia patient. And I Googled, and I couldn't find that this exists. I tried Googling a lot of different things, and I couldn't find any evidence that this is a real thing. So I don't know if that's Google failing me, or if it's a weird thing that isn't real. You all may know, I've mentioned many times, I don't like reading about dementia. I don't like reading about Alzheimer's. I have my own trauma with that. I don't like it. And I really, it bugged me a lot. It bugged me a lot. I kept going to Google. Instead of reading this book, I kept going to Google and being is this a real thing? And trying different things because it was bothering me so much. This is one of those things where the good guys, the main characters, the love interests, they don't care if you're getting raped. They don't care if you're getting abused unless they've decided that they're attracted to you. Then it matters, but otherwise it really doesn't matter. And even then it doesn't matter completely. I don't like that either. I would say that the writing was pretty good. I would say that the couple were interesting, but I had a lot of issues with the whole plot. Then I reread Enchanted by Gail, Carson, Levine. This is a 5-star. This is my all-time favorite book as a young teenager. I read it 5 times in a couple of years. I read this for live on Nox's channel. It does not have the same impact as an adult as it did for me when I was the target demographic, which is good. This is a Cinderella retelling, and the main character is cursed with obedience by a fairy. It's a gift, but it's really a curse, right? And she has to obey any command that's directly given to you. So if you say, "Can you bring that over here to me?" she would have a choice. If you say, "Bring that to me," she wouldn't have a choice, right? And the thing that I really liked about this book is that the main character is not a people pleaser. She is just her own person. What other people do with the curse does not affect her perception of herself. She will fight you and make you annoyed and be so incredibly petty to get around the curse, which that's great all by itself. But even beyond that, she does not feel less than because of this. And she doesn't feel it reflects on her as a person. And it's just a very interesting character work, and one that I would highly recommend for 10 to 15-year-olds. She is 15 and getting married, but I loved that because when I was that age, a 25-year-old getting married would have been completely ancient. I don't even know those people. So as an adult, I'm why is she getting married at 15? But as a kid, it was oh, she's just a little bit older than me. That's a weird thing. But again, I think it works for the fantasy world and the age demographic that you're writing to. Then I read I'll Never Be Your Crown Princess, Volume 1. This is 5 stars. This is a loan from Izzy, and obviously the recommendation from her. All of the manga that I read is So this is a fantasy romance with an arranged marriage and dubious consent. A lot of manga has dubious consent. This one definitely does. It worked for me. Might not work for you if you don't like that at all. She is like basically reincarnated, so she had a life in Japan in a former life, and she remembers that life, and now she's like in this fantasy world. And there's like stuff with magic and virginity and, you know, stuff like that. So I loved it just as much as I thought it would. I had really high expectations. I thought it would be the one that would appeal to me, and I did really enjoy it. Then I read volume 2, again 5 stars, more dubious consent. There is a childhood friend introduced as a rival love interest. The prince that she's engaged to and like has the romance with, she really has a thing for his like military uniform, and that was pretty funny. I thought that was a good little humorous plot point. Then I read Pregnant by the Playboy by Jackie Lau. I gave this 4 stars. I bought this years ago before the whole Roe v. Wade stuff, when things were first happening in Texas. There was a fundraiser for abortion rights, and Jackie Lau put this in the fundraiser because it does talk about the main character having an abortion, and I bought it then, and it's just been sitting on my Kindle since, so I finally did read it. So one night stand, she had an abortion back in college. Now she's in her 30s. She's ready for a child with or without a co-parent, especially because with or without a co-parent, she would be financially stable and able to take care of her child. But she really likes him as a person, and when he finds out that she's pregnant, that really, like, his joy at that really solidifies like her wanting to keep the baby, and so they're going to be co-parents. And he immediately is like, I'll marry you today, and she's like, absolutely not. And he really dotes on her and caters to her through her pregnancy, so she is pregnant for the majority of this book. And as someone who has been pregnant, I enjoy that so much, like so much, because they're not in a relationship. But if she calls and is like, hey, I have a craving, he's going out of his way to get it. And that was just so sweet. He sold his company, burned out, has been living the Playboy life, is getting really just tired of partying, and is definitely the type of personality where whatever his new thing is, like, he's dedicated all the way. So that's kind of how he treats the idea of being married and having a baby. And so the main character, she's like really like not too sure about that, because like he's done this before. And I just thought that that was a realistic conflict, and that like her pumping the brakes made sense, and also him like falling in love with her also made sense, and it was just really sweet. I also really liked that they were both Asian. I believe they were both Chinese Canadian, but they were both Asian characters. There is also a lot of talk about her losing her father as a child and grief and being afraid of love and things like that. So if that's something you want to avoid in your books, maybe proceed with caution. Then I read Something's Wrong with Us volume 5. This is a romantic thriller manga, is how it was described to me. If you like romantic thrillers, if you like dark romance, this is the manga for you. And so far it's really lived up to that recommendation, that expectation for me. So I gave this volume 4 stars. There's some further progression. Nothing major happens. There's like a little bit of a thing, but good. Then volume 6, 5 stars. There's a big reveal, moving right along, very intriguing, very just like, who is lying, who did what, who knows what's happening, who can you trust, or who will win? Like, will they be able to hurt you, or will you be able to stop them from hurting you? And then volume 7, also 5 stars. This finishes the first story arc. There is a content warning for miscarriage, and this ends part 1. Lots happens. You have all these big reveals. Like, all of the reveals that you've been anticipating have now concluded, and then there's a time jump. And it's just like, so what is part 2 gonna be like? I have no idea. Then I read For Her Protection, which is Night Brothers number 3 by Dria Andersen. I give this 5 stars. This is one of my most enjoyable books of the month. And this is Black love paranormal shifters. So this series, the first 2 books are about brothers who are the Night Brothers, who are panther shifters. And then this book is about their bodyguard, who is a bear shifter. He has to be her bodyguard, and so like gruff and quiet and protective. He has some trauma that damaged his vocal cords, so he has a very gravelly, deep voice. And she is the daughter of the head of the bears. So he is a bear, but he's not part of their faction. He's the panther like head family bodyguard, right? And like adopted into their family basically. His father was abusive, so content warning for that. Just, I love a quiet, broody, large bodyguard. I love it. It is one of my absolute favorite character types. It doesn't even have to be bodyguard. I just love like a giant, quiet man who either is like a dirty talker or like super protective, but in general, like he can be kind. Like he doesn't have to be an a-hole, but he's also quiet and like serious. So good. And yeah, she just really, really delivered on this one for me. It was everything that I wanted. I was so happy. I was so happy with it. Then I read Queen and Conqueror, which is the Queen's Red Guard #1 by Isabelle Olmo. This is 5 stars. This was amazing. It was amazing. This is fantasy romance and it is feminist fantasy, and you have a queen and she is like the powerhouse, right? And she does lose her husband, and she decides that for political reasons she's going to marry the king who defeated her husband in battle, and she's going to take over his country through marriage. And it's great. It's great, especially because like that king is one of those characters where he acts like a fool, but he is intelligent and he does understand what's happening, but he doesn't enjoy those things. He really appreciates her mind as well. It's so good. She's so clever. She's so powerful. She's really good at manipulating people and doing what she needs to like make the outcome match up with what she wants. This is dark. It's very dark. You have a lot of content warnings, ableist language, homophobia, torture, incest, sexual abuse of a minor by a family member, other sexual abuse, other like rape and stuff referenced. You have a lesbian couple that is like tortured for being lesbian. Like there's a lot, I would proceed with caution. There's a lot of dark things. That's besides poker through the heart and like breaking your legs and burning your feet. Like there's a lot there, okay? I will say the ending of this book was not quite as good for me as like the first 70% or so, but it didn't take a start off, partially because the beginning was so good and the character was so good. Definitely proceed with caution, I would say, but at the same time, if you want steamy fantasy romance and like that powerful queen character who is good at being queen, I love it. I love it so much. And I read To Touch a Dragon, which is Venys Needs Men. Tropical Dragons #1 by Naomi Lucas. I gave this 3 stars. This is like a collaborative couple of series where each book's by a different author. Multi-author universe / series. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. Okay? It wasn't. They like have a village and they need men. There's no men in her village other than like her father and grandfather. So she hears a story about you can go find a dragon because the dragons are awakening, and if you touch them they turn into a man and they're like very devoted to you. And she does that and he's not happy, and there's like a female dragon like stalking them and battling them, and just honestly a lot of weirdness, and I didn't really enjoy it. And I reread The Golden Dynasty, which is Fantasyland #2 by Kristen Ashley. This is a 5-star book. It's an all-time favorite, so like the rating can't change. I skimmed a lot, especially the abuse scenes. There's a lot of domestic abuse in this book, and I would really recommend proceeding with caution. This is like Khal Drogo Khaleesi from Game of Thrones is like that setting, and it is just as brutal as that world is. Rape, domestic abuse, lots of graphic things, okay? So I skimmed a lot of this, but I do that for a lot of rereads because I reread for the couple interactions. Some rereads I do like heavily read the books, but a lot of times I will skip like the setup intro before like the couple meets, and I will skip any like scenes I don't like or like any characters I don't care about or conversations with them. Like this is a common thing I do when I reread because I'm rereading for my pleasure. I'm not rereading to find out what the story is. I know what the story is. I'm here for the good times. This is a dark fantasy romance. Content warnings are rape, non-con, dub-con, abuse, domestic abuse, suicide, graphic death, pregnancy, difficult delivery, homophobia, fat phobia, women are not treated well. Also slavery. So yeah, If you've seen Game of Thrones, that's what you're thinking of. All of that's present in this romance book. So again, proceed with caution. At the same time, as problematic, honestly, as the entire setup is, I'm still a fan. I'm still a fan. So there's that. This is a woman in her 30s, goes to sleep in her apartment and wakes up in a pen for the bride hunt at this like tribe, and she has no idea what's going on. So it's the horde, it's the whole thing. Really good, but really dark. Then I read Scarred, which is Never After #2 by Emily McIntyre. I finally read it. If you've been waiting for this moment, I rated it 3 stars. I honestly did not enjoy it as much as I thought I would. So I should have DNF'd this, to be perfectly honest with you. I really should have. And actually, when I finished this after, I was like, I should have DNF'd you. I lowered my Goodreads goal by $50. And I was like, I'm not playing this game. I don't have a Goodreads goal to challenge myself to read more. I just have a Goodreads goal to keep track of the books that I read. That's it. I'm not finishing books to me the number. I am not. So inconsistencies abound. So you have this like noblewoman who is going to go marry the king. It's all been arranged, and she is going to kill the king and his family because they killed her father. And this is like 1910s, 1920s, that type of thing. So she has a romance with the king's brother. And these are 2 people who will go after the crown no matter what. And there's a lot of ableism. There's a lot of like bad things, honestly, in this book. And the characters were supposed to be ruthless and like villainy and anti-hero, and you were supposed to be rooting for them anyways, but really like just the way that they were okay with using people didn't really sit great with me, because like you're the elite and you are like so comfortable talking about using all of these people who have been neglected and abused because of ableism and things like that. How comfortable you are with them like dying as your fodder, and like you don't care about it all, while also promising them a good life, but really you're the only one that's going to end up with a good life. And I don't know, like that just too realistic for me. I wasn't really having a great time. So yeah, they're going after the crown. They're willing to kill anyone who gets in their way, including each other. It's dark romance, but content warnings are abuse, torture, death of characters you like, ableism, sexual assault, forced abortion, suicide. Again, a lot. It was the inconsistencies. If you're gonna write a character, I really just need to feel like that character is acting in line with what you have set up their character to be, and I cannot stand it when it bothers me, when I'm just like, this doesn't make sense. Pick a struggle. Then I read Mother's Day In, which is a Hollow Knights book, obviously Mother's Day, by Lee Jacquet. 4 stars. This is an older woman, younger man. She is a single mom. He taught her daughter swim lessons and was a lifeguard and stuff. And he's had a thing for her forever, but she hasn't been ready since her breakup. There's breeding kink with no baby. She's on birth control, so there's breeding kink with no pregnancy. I will say, like, the inn that they have all their sexual things at, it's his parents' in, and that didn't really work for me. Then I read Heartless Villains, which is Ruthless Villains #3 by Marion Blackwood. Gave this 4 stars. We have the repetitive phrasing that ruins my life. These are 2 villains, and they are, you know, trying to kill each other when we first meet them and falling in love through circumstances that make them have to work together. And in this book, they're both in love with each other, but don't tell each other. They do tell each other then. So you're leaving this book with them as a couple who knows that they love each other, which I love. Like, please don't drag it out any more than that, right? But like, especially with the sex scenes, his dark smile, his wicked smile, that's wicked smirk, like dark desire, it just really kills me inside, because I would like the book so much better without it. And I do really like the book despite it, but like from a technical perspective, and I am not a technical grammar criticizing girl. I am not your editor. Don't come to me for that. My punctuation is comma, 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 period. So yeah, that is not my forte. That's not even like a thing that I worry about too much. When I'm just like, oh, this should have been edited out, like this doesn't work, that bugs me, because I am not like real high on that. So if I'm picking it up, I feel like you should have picked it up. So they're on a quest together. They admit that they love each other. We now have the next challenge ready. So next book. I'm very excited. I hope that like they really work together well as a couple. I'm really excited to see them together as a couple, and I'm hoping that that lives up to my expectation. But this is like steamy, kinky, lots of knife to the throat, hand to the throat, you know, that type of thing. There were some really good scenes in this that I thought like really well done. So yeah, overall I really enjoy it, and that repetitive phrasing ruins my life. Then I read Sweep With Me, which is Innkeeper Chronicles 4.5. It is a novella by Ilona Andrews, obviously for the Ilona Andrews / Innkeeper Chronicles read along. I gave this 4 stars. This is a novella that follows our main characters, Sean and Dina, during the events of book number 4, which followed her sister and Arland, who is the space vampire. So they are innkeepers. This is sci-fi paranormal romance. She's an innkeeper. He's a werewolf, and they are now an established couple, and so they're innkeepers together. And there are space philosopher chickens, which I think you might really enjoy. And yeah, it's just kind of like a holiday novella, kind of to let you know what's happening at the inn during the events of book number 4. Then I read Obsidian Feathers by N. Caceres, and I gave this 3 stars. This is a dark Latin. It's marketed as fantasy, but honestly I would call it paranormal. It's here on Earth, but you have like these shadow shifter, like god, demon, spirit people. So I would honestly call it paranormal. Okay, you caution number 1, if I were you and you were reading this and you were me, I would literally tell you to read the prologue and then skip the first 2 chapters. It's just about how awful her life is and how like awful her controlling mother and fiance are. And like personally, I don't need to read that abuse to get the gist. I don't. So I like heavily skimmed that. I would say you can just skip the first 2 chapters, honestly. She goes on a business trip to the jungle. That's really where, you know, our romance and things are starting. So you have rough sex. Very rough sex. Toxic family, not great pacing. Really, truly, I just did not feel like the pacing was great in this. I feel like this is not a thing I say a whole lot. It just felt disjointed to me in that way. Not great communication. Did this thing where you have this dark romance and you have this like alpha hole character, and he's dark and he's broody and he's like making mistakes and stuff, but then you humanize him to the reader via conversations with the main character and side characters, or with the hero and side characters, but they aren't communicating to each other. So it's like he was an a-hole and you feel bad for him because you see the conversation he was having with his friend, but he didn't communicate or like make that right really with the main character. And then you have like the main character talking to his cousin, and the cousin's like, oh, he's not that bad. Why didn't he explain anything to you? That's so dumb. And then like explained it to her. But like the couple's never having those conversations, and I really, really don't like that. I don't. Yeah, also like some gross cannibalism. So be careful of that. I needed our couple to do a better job at being a couple. I really, really did. Then I read Love, Comment, Subscribe, which is Ponto Beach Reunion number 1 by Kathy Yardley. I gave this 5 stars. I got this recommendation almost a whole year ago from Sil at Book Voyager on Twitter. I would say that this is more women's fiction-y almost. It was a romance, but like there was a lot more about their lives than I would typically enjoy, but I did really enjoy it. You have an unlikable main character, which I thought was done so well. Like, she is not a perfect main character. There are a lot of things where you're like, girl, you were wrong. You were in the wrong. And honestly, she really felt human, and like her growth and realizing how she was treating other people and things like that. It was good. You have 2 Asian main characters. They were in the nerd group in high school together, and they were enemies in high school, and then they have both independently made it to millions of viewers on YouTube. And I think if you know the beauty community history on YouTube, or gaming community, and or you are a content creator yourself, you will extra enjoy this book. It talks about like burnout and like content creation, and definitely reference different things that have happened that I was entertained by. I laughed I cried. It hit the spot. Like, I don't know if I just read it in the right mood or what, but like it really worked well for me. He's like very goofy and she's very serious. And she's a beauty YouTuber and he's gimmicky / game streaming guy. And even like their breakup, I feel like you really kind of blame her and she's at fault. But again, it kind of felt real. And well, yeah, I can see why these characters would make that mistake, but that doesn't stop them from their happily ever after, right? Really, really good. Then I read Murder Most Foul, which is Cock and Oyster Historical Cozy Mysteries #1 by Elizabeth Grace. I gave this 2 stars. This is a Shakespeare retelling. It's a cozy mystery / kinky book. You have a lord and he is like also a spy, and then his love interest, they're already together at the start of the book, okay, is a black brothel owner, and they are both in their 40s, established couple. He's trying to get her to marry him and she's like, maybe. I will say, for a book that is based on murder and is based in a brothel with characters who are actively participating in kink, there was a weird amount of kink shaming and also size shaming. I thought it was weird and I never liked that. I don't think that making fun of men's bodies is so much better than making fun of women's bodies. So yeah, I didn't like that. Then I read Wild Pitch, which is Dominating the Diamond #1 by Kat Geraldo. I gave this 4 stars. This is a book that was done really well. That is not really necessarily my type of book, but because it was done so well, I still enjoyed it so much that I think that if it is your type of book, you will absolutely love it. So you have 2 baseball players. He is a older catcher and he's Filipino, and then you have a younger first female woman player in the Major League Baseball league. And she is Latina, and they are both bi, and he's like a little bit grumpy and she's like, you know, prickly, like standing up for herself. And they have a really great, not only professional dynamic, but also couple dynamic. There are like multiple breakups in this book, I will say. There's some kink, but one of the main things that made it like not work as well for me, that I think would really work well for you maybe, is that she is dominant and he is submissive. That is not my dynamic. That is not my vibe. Like, that's not what does it for me. However, it was done very well. Lots of kink, lots of good aftercare and consent, and like just really good, her telling him what to do and stuff like that, and just giving him what he needed. And it was just done really, really well. So I don't really care about baseball romance all that much, and I don't really care for that dynamic. That's not something that's going to have me picking up a book. However, if either of those things interest you significantly more than they interest me, I think that you would absolutely love it, because I think it was done phenomenally well. Then I reread Hitting the Wall, which is Stone County #1 by Kate C. Wells. 5 stars. This is like my favorite book of last year. This is where like a teenager gets pregnant at a one-night stand and then gets run out of town and then comes back 6 years later with the child, right? And the father, he doesn't know anything about it, and he has to realize that the people around him are not as good as he thought they were in a lot of different ways. And I think that this is very relatable for like ex-evangelicals or ex-conservatives. Like, if you were raised one way and like taught these specific things of right and wrong, and then you grow up, I don't know how good of people you all were. You always treated me well, or even like the things that were questionable, like I could dismiss, but it's like some glaring things that once you see them, it's very hard to unsee. And maybe you were excusing it, maybe you were part of the problem, and then like the guilt of that and having to come to terms with that and having to face it. And do you just stuck your head in the sand so that you can continue feeling like you and everyone else around you are good people, or do you admit to the harm that you do? I just feel like this series, but this book even more specifically, really speaks to that. Because at the beginning you hate everyone, and at the end you still kind of hate some people, but there are some people that you don't hate. Really bad things and can you have a happily ever after them. Also, their child is autistic, and so there's quite a bit on page. I really loved how she unconditionally loved her child and fought for her child. And then I reread the next book, which is Against a Wall. It's about the love interest, his younger brother. Also 5 stars, also like a favorite of last year. This is a high school bully he's a himbo. He's so dumb. And he's actually like really sweet, but he's so dumb. And like they were friends when they were kids, and then she stopped hanging out at their house, and he was really mad at her and he was mean to her. And some of the things, like, he was not being intentionally mean, but she read them as mean. And there were some things where like he was being mean, but he wasn't, like, he was just upset. And then like you get her point of view, and it's like, oh, you're just like, oh, you poor baby. Really fascinating, honestly, how he does so many bad things and he's so dumb, and yet you really do like him. So her mom died when she was a kid, so constant warning for that. And like her dad had depression and wasn't able to take care of her for like a while after her mom died. And so, you know, again, maybe proceed with caution on that. So there's a hunting accident, so caution on that too. And also a side character is dying from cancer. So, and I'll tell you what, Kate C. Wells makes for such good rereads. Such good rereads. I have reread multiple of her books, and her books are like very intense and stressful for me. And so when you're rereading, you already know like the worst thing that happens and the pacing and like what to expect, and that really helps me, and that really makes for a really good reread, because every single one of the rereads, I have loved it just as much, if not more, the second time around, because she just does a really good job every single time of writing these characters where you're just like, I don't know if I can like you, and you do end up liking them, and it's just really a skill. I will read all the books that she ever writes. So that's it. That's all of the books that I read in May. If you have read or want to read any of these, let me know, or your favorite book in May. Honestly, I would call this month mostly pretty meh, but with a few standouts that I really, really enjoyed, and like a lot of rereads. So that's how you always know either I'm slumping or like I'm not doing the best mentally, whatever, like I need comfort. Rereads are like my favorite thing. So thanks so much for watching. Bye.